time for us to check back in with the history and family stories of Opal Myers. If you've missed any of those previous readings, just look in the description below for a playlist, and you can also find a link in the description of where to buy this wonderful, wonderful book. Helping others. One of those jobs was being a helper. At one time, when we lived in the mission house, we had a big, long cupboard full of things that people could borrow. If someone got sick, there were clean nightgowns and linens, or when there was a death in a family, we would loan out clean sheets and pillowcases, towels, and things like that for family members who came in from out of town and spent a night or two. When someone in the community died, the body was always brought back to their home for a viewing. That meant that the person's house had to be cleaned up, linens and curtains washed, food needed to be cooked and brought in for the family and for the viewing. I did all of those things or got a group of people together to get things done faster. At the viewing or at the funeral, there were always people who liked to go and see how the dead person looked after the funeral home fixed them all up. It sounded kind of morbid to me. I didn't care a thing about comparing the living with the dead. But others would talk about how good this one looked or how this one didn't look like anything like he did in real life. I thought, how foolish. It was a very strange curiosity indeed, and a senseless thing to be talking about. There was too much else that needed to be done to help out rather than talking about a dead person's appearance. The families didn't need to be hearing such talk, and they shouldn't have to think about all the things that needed to be taken care of. It seemed that there were always children or babies to help out with, so that's what I did. After I'd started teaching up in Del Rio, a lot of the teachers there kindly helped out with sheets or food or whatever I might need. Whenever there was a need for food, we would share whatever we might have in our own cupboards. I was really excited when I found this man who had a hospital bed that he would let me have for $40. We decided to sell candy to raise the money to pay for it, and several of the children took that on as a project. The candy came in boxes of 24 bars, and for every box we sold, we made 80 cents. 50 boxes or 1,200 bars of candy was a whole lot of candy to sell, but it really didn't take us long to raise that $40. We'd get 15 or 20 boxes every week or two and give them to the youngins, and they would sell them on the school bus and to their neighbors. It was funny how people responded to our latest purchase. When we first got our hospital bed, no one wanted to borrow it because they were just sure somebody had died in it. Well, I do imagine that several somebodies have done just that, I would tell them, but you can rest assured that we took all the bodies out and cleaned it up real good. When Frank Turner got sick and borrowed that bed, people changed their thinking. You see, everybody saddled up to Frank as one of the big shots in the community because he had really made something of himself. He was just about the only one around here with any money to speak of, so after he borrowed it and slept in it without dying, they didn't seem to have a problem about it anymore, and several of them ended up using it too. Everyone around here looked up to Frank as someone special. He was born with less than nothing, but worked hard to make something of himself, and the community people respected him for that. Frank was older when he started school and worked around the mission, helping however he could to earn his tuition money. The chapel women managed to get him a scholarship and helped to send him off to high school. I've heard Frank tell several times that when he graduated and came back here, he had an education but not much of anything else, not even a good pair of shoes. He actually had to borrow the shoes he wore when he went out to get his first job. Later, Frank went to work in the coal mines in West Virginia, where he worked his way up to head electrician. He lived on as little as he could manage and saved all the rest of the money he made. A lot of people up here considered him well-to-do. Mrs. Etta Nichols, most everybody called her Granny, was another person who I would say did the work of a missionary too. She was 14 years older than me and had been a midwife since her early 30s. She helped birth babies all over the county, around the Del Rio area. Well, in 1967, both Etta's mother and mother-in-law became very sick and moved in with her. With the responsibility of caring for two sick women, she didn't know what she was going to do or how she was going to get out to deliver babies and at the same time take care of the sick in her own home. I gave her that hospital bed and told her to use it there in her birthing room. I would come and look after her mother and mother-in-law when I wasn't teaching so she could take care of her cases. You see, we worked together like that, similar to how the chapel women helped people. So that became the floating hospital bed. It was a real nice one with a tray that would pull out over in front of the patient so they could eat on it or write notes. It had little steps that pulled out to make it easy to get in and out of bed. That bed's been all around the community. I don't know where it is now, but I don't believe the Lord would let anybody destroy it. I like thinking it's still out in the community somewhere with somebody using it. Decoration Day project, Memorial Day. Every year, just before Decorations Day, I always took up a collection so we could pay somebody to clean up the cemetery. Last year, we collected $127, but the money disappeared. We don't know who the money was turned over to or where it went. We still have no idea of what happened to it, and because of that, we couldn't hire anyone to do the job. So not long before Decoration Day, some of the church people came to me and asked, "What are you going to do? There ain't nobody cleaned up that cemetery yet." "Why, my lands, why don't yuns get out there and hunt somebody?" We wouldn't know what to say or do. People wouldn't pay us no mind. "Are you saying that you want me to take care of it?" "Yeah." "Okay, you tell everybody to be at the cemetery on May 14th and we'll clean it up. Then we'll decide what to do from then on." There were only 3 people that showed up. One of them showed up out of the frustration from the dogs digging holes all around the cemetery and doing their business right there on her mother's grave. The dogs that were doing that actually belonged to her uncle, and she was furious about it. "We have got to get a fence put around this place." Well, we marked off the cemetery boundary and talked to the landowner about wanting to put a fence up. But he claimed that where we wanted to put the fence would be on his property. He said he would move the line to where it should be, and then we could put up our fence. Well, he moved the line way over where it would actually put some of the graves on his side of the fence. The people got really upset, just fighting mad. "We can't let him take land off the cemetery. What are we going to do about him?" "We won't do anything, never. We don't have to. The Lord will take care of him. Just forget about it." I really didn't think there was much to worry about anyway. If he took a strip off that side of the property, it would take his parents out of the cemetery, so I didn't see any need of making a big deal out of it. The Lord could change his heart without a word from us, and that's exactly what happened. Every time something came up like that, the Lord would take care of it, and we never did have to worry about it. That year, we started getting volunteers to clean the cemetery and use the Decoration Day offering for the fence. We decided to do that every year, and with donations and raising money, we plan to have the fence paid for in 3 years. We're working on that now. We've got one side wired, and we've got enough money to make up another side, and then we've only got 2 sides to go. Ben's brother gave me $100 to put towards it when he was up here the last time. You see, many community people who live away from here don't have a way of taking care of their family's graves, and they're glad to give money to get that fence up. The projects over the years never seem to dwindle. It might take a while, but we've always been able to get the money. If people know what you're trying to do and think it's a worthy cause, they will help out. So all I ever had to do was talk to everyone about this project or that one, and then they would talk to someone else about it. Eventually, the right people heard about it and wanted to contribute to the effort. We would also sell candy, homemade lye soap, and other things like that at Del Rio Days to raise money for different projects. Now with taxes and such, there's not much profit in selling candy like we used to do, and they don't let the kids sell candy around the school anymore. There was a special secret project that I started helping someone with back in the 50s that we're still doing. To this day, no one knows who I work with on this, so I still can't tell their name. Anyway, this friend of mine would give me money to help one child every year. Sometimes it would be the same child for several years, or it could be a different one every year. It just depends on the need. My friend started off with $5, and now she's up to $100 a semester. The money goes towards buying their lunch, books, and other things for school. The last time I decided to choose one special family that we could help for several years. I've already helped 3 of them through high school, and now I'm working on the 4th. I've helped several like that, and they really appreciate it. It wasn't all that much money, just enough to help them to continue with their education. I've always kept it a secret because so many people would feel bad that I didn't help them. Most of the time, the children we were helping didn't even know because I would give the money to their mother and she would use it for the child. I had to be real careful not to offend people though, but helping others is why God gives us blessings, so we should use what we have to better the world in some small way. That's always how I felt about it anyway. 1970 to 1986, Barry and Benja moved in. Selden ended up joining the Army, and Carrie married Kathy Webb and had 2 boys, Barry Alvin, who was born in July of 1968, and Benjamin Anthony Benja, who was born on October 23, 1969. Carrie and Kathy divorced, and the boys came to live with me on December 15, 1970. Barry wasn't quite 2.5 years old, and Benja, even though he was just a little over a year old, still couldn't sit up alone or help himself. As soon as my landlord found out about Barry and Benja, she came and exclaimed, "You can't take in those kids." "Why, I can too." Well, we went back and forth like that, and I ended it by saying, "Yes, I can have my grandchildren here. I can get a babysitter for them while I'm teaching, and it will all work out just fine." That was the end of that, at least for a while. I got the babysitter, and their daddy paid for her, but when I was there with Barry and Benja, they certainly kept me busy, kept me hopping for sure. They weren't mean children. They didn't get into stuff and destroy things. They were just very active. Not too long after they moved in with me, about the time Benja could finally crawl and get into things, Barry came up next to me in the kitchen, and I kept hearing a strange sound of something following after him. About that time, Barry turned around and said, come on now." And there came Benja, just a-crawling away, trying to catch up with him. How Barry ever got him out of his bed and put him on the floor, I'll never know. Just a pure wonder that he didn't drop him on his head. Barry and Benja went with me to church right from the start. I always believed that you should get children started in church when they were little. When Corinne was still a tiny baby, we took an orange crate, put a blanket in it, and had it sitting on the stage there at the church to lay her down in. She just stayed there, and Miss Minnie would keep an eye on her. Miss Minnie helped me too when my boys were little. She carried Carrie to church on her back, and I carried Selden. That's the way we carried them all the time until they were big enough to walk a long distance. Miss Minnie would have them sitting by her or hold them during church, and they never moved from their seats. I never had to tell them to sit down, and I never had to take them outside for a scolding. They knew exactly what they were supposed to do. Of course, Miss Minnie and Mrs. Click helped me a lot. I never would have been able to teach and do the things I did all those years without them. So when I started taking Barry and Benja to church, I did the same thing. I would take Barry and put him down on the seat next to Miss Minnie, and she would hold Benja. They always stayed right where I put them. I never had a bit of trouble. Even later, right up through when they were teenagers, Barry and Benja sat with me in church. Where we lived, I would have to go across the road to get the mail. I always took both of them with me because I was afraid they would follow me out in the road and get run over. But when it was raining, I didn't want them walking through the field of mud, so I would dress them up in their coats and caps, and they thought they were going with me. I would sit them down on the porch and put their coat tails under the heavy trunk sitting near the door so they couldn't get up to follow me. You talk about screaming. Those kids would scream. But I just went on. As long as they were crying, I knew where they were. We had a little dog that got killed right there in the road one day, and that made me scareder than ever. If people couldn't see a dog, you know they probably wouldn't see a little child either. Children are easier to handle when they're little than when they are big. People would say, "Won't you be glad when they grow up?" No, I won't be glad when they grow up because these youngins are just too much fun little. They were something else. But you know, I enjoyed them at every age. My landlord hadn't said any more about Barry and Benja living with me for some time. Then one day she came and told me, "You're not supposed to have two families living in this house." I've not got two families. These boys are my family. But she insisted, "When you took Barry and Benja in, they are another family, the family of your son." I knew then what she meant. She was saying that I shouldn't have taken them in and I should have consulted her. I guess that's true, but when you get desperate like that, you just don't think. I told her as soon as I could find another place, we would move. Opal's just having to move and to move and to move. And if you remember, she has that wonderful land that she owns up there where the mission was at. This is closer to Del Rio where she's living now, but she's teaching and she can't travel that distance because the roads were just so bad. I'm sure today it would be fine, but in the day of Opal, the roads were just so bad she couldn't move back up there, even though she had a house and the land where she could live. So this part was interesting, started out interesting, and just another example of Opal trying to help everyone. Like she had all those different supplies, and especially when somebody died, she would reach out to them and say, "I have extra linen, I have extra even nightgowns," she said, "towels, pillowcases, whatever you need. I have extras, so you can borrow them while your people come in for the funeral before they go back." Of course, she helped with the food. She talks about how she helped with the kids, like if there was kids around, she'd just babysit them so the family could grieve. And then she talks about, of course, how in those days they did sit up with the dead, is what we would say. They would bring the bodies back home. After they went to the funeral home, they'd bring them back home, and that's where they would have the viewing, and kind of the body would lay in state there until it was time for the funeral. Now, people don't do that as much today. There may be some people, though, that do it here and there. In my lifetime, growing up, my Granny Gazzy at her house, that's how they did it there. Not for all of them, but for some of them. Some of her children, some of Granny's brothers and sisters, that's what they did. They brought the body back home there, and that's, you know, you think about going to the funeral home for a viewing. Instead, people just came to Granny Gazzy's house, and there they were, just all at the house. So there's probably some people in certain places still doing it like that. I have a buddy right here, and it's a dreaded squash bug. Goodbye. Knocked him off. I knocked him off the porch. Anyway, just a different time and things that were done differently in those days. Amazing, even in that part when she's talking about helping all the people, then she hears that there's this hospital bed. Well, if you've ever took care of someone at home that's maybe like an invalid that got real sick and can't get up and down and all that, a hospital bed is just a lifesaver, because you can raise them up to eat and lay them back down, all the various ways of, usually there's a way to lower it and let them, help them get in and raise it back up. You know, I know with my Papa Wade, when he was sick, we had a hospital bed for him. I think as people enter into the hospice phase, that's, you know, fairly normal for them to provide that for you. I know with Miss Cindy, Matt's mother, that was one of the things the hospice people asked us, you know, over and over, did we want a hospital bed? We didn't ever get one for Miss Cindy. The way her house was, her bed was just set up really good for somebody being sick, and bless her heart, she didn't last long, so, you know, it wasn't that long of us trying to prop her up with pillows and things like that. But wonderful that Opal just knew, I got to get that because it will help everybody. Not just, I don't have anybody sick in my family right now, but it will help everyone, help everybody. And so she worked hard to get it. And her talking about selling the candy reminded me of all the things at school that they sold when I was a kid. Now, when we sold stuff, or even my brother Steve, it was to raise money for the school, usually a school trip or something like that. But I remember the candy bars. I remember when Steve, I was real little and didn't sell it, but Steve selling would sell those like kind of hard candies that come in a tin, and you peeled off with a key, peeled off the top, and then there was the candy. I remember them selling those. I remember it was really popular in our area about that same time that students would sell, and I never did again, but Steve did, but sell like plaques. A lot of them were like religious. You think about the, you know, the famous picture of a little boy and a little girl going across the bridge and the angel watching over them, like that, or maybe, you know, the Lord's picture and then like a prayer or something, or him looking, you know, through the looking out into the garden where he'd just risen, all those kind of things. I bet you can immediately think of some of them that were popular in those days. And so I remember people selling those too. Makes you think of all those different things. But wonderful that the kids basically raised the money for her to get the hospital bed. And then I like the part where she says, you know, she don't even know where it's at anymore, but she just knows the good Lord wouldn't let it be, you know, destroyed, and she figures somebody's just using it, and maybe this person used it, maybe their spouse or whoever was dying or was sick and they got better, or either they died and then they said, well, I'll keep it, and then they found out their neighbor needed it, and then they, you know, it just went from house to house. So really amazing, but all because Opal said we need to get that hospital bed. It all leads back to her. Then there was the Mrs. Etta Nichols. So she was the granny woman, the midwife, even though she wasn't that old when she started, but then she just helped, you know, birth all these different kids, and how wonderful that was. But then her mother and her mother-in-law got sick at the same time, and then she brought them home to take care of them. Well, then that meant her midwife duties was going to suffer because of that, but Opal stepped right in and said, no, here's the hospital bed, and you can use it for your patients, and I'll come and I'll stay if it's not while I'm teaching, and you can continue doing what you're doing. So amazing that she helped her. She just said, no, you can't stop. You provide too valuable a resource for our community, so you can't stop. And there was a little footnote I wanted to go back and read to you, because if you would like to know more about her, there's a book about her. It says, there was a book written about Mrs. Nichols, Etta Granny Nichols. The book's name was Granny Nichols, Last of the Old-Timey Midwives by Sharon Smith Letford, in which Opal is mentioned on page 139. However, there is a misstatement. When Opal was 11 years old in 1922, it was Miss Martson, you remember Miss Martson, rather than Lenora Whitaker, who influenced Opal. Lenora and her husband left Ebenezer Mission in March of 1912. And Lenora and her husband, that was Catherine Marshall's parents, if I'm not wrong. Some of you will correct me if I am, but I believe so. that started her wanting to write the book, Christy, that Opal helped give her information about. Anyway, but if you wanted to find that book, Etta Granny Nichols, Last of the Old-Timey Midwives by Sharon Smith Letford. So you could certainly look that up and read it, and I'm sure it would be great. But wonderful that Opal was able to help her and help her continue doing what she wanted to do, or what she needed to do for the community. I guess that was her calling, if she'd been like the granny woman all those years. Then comes the cemetery. I love Opal's attitude about it. So they were going to clean it up, and the gentleman that owned part of the land says, hey, that's not where you can put the fence. Actually, part of that's mine. And of course, people got upset. I can just imagine. I would have got upset too if I'd have been there. But I love Opal's faith. She just said, not worrying about it. The Lord will take care of it. He can change his heart without us even, saying a word. I'm sure she meant without us fussing and pitching a fit. Let's just let it go. We ain't ready to build the fence anyway. Just let it go. But I love her faith. And she said every time a problem like that come up, that's what she did. She just prayed about it and said, Lord, you just have to handle it. I'm not that faithful. I wish I was. I want to be. But sometimes when you're just at the end of your rope is when you find faith like that. When Corey and Katie were first born, I had to have C-section. Of course, I've got 2 new babies, and all the rigors of feeding them every 2 hours, 3 hours in the beginning. You got just round the clock. I was recovering from my surgery. I had some other little health issues that, not because of the, I don't know. I think it was a result of the pregnancy, but I developed them right when I come home from the hospital, so I didn't feel that great. All those things. So when I would get Corey and Katie to sleep, of course I had those new mother fears, like what if they quit breathing? Should I just stand there and stare at them all night? What should I do? I just would pray, Lord, you just got to take care of them. I just can't. I've got to lay down or die. I've just got to go lay down, and dear Lord, I pray you'll let me hear them. I pray you'll make sure they don't quit breathing. When you're a new mother, all those things go through your mind. But I just had to let him. There was just nothing else I could do about it because of my exhaustion and then my health issues that I was having too. But I wish I could be like Opal. She's an inspiration. I wish every time I get troubled by something, I would just say, the Lord will work it out. The Lord will work it out. Because He will. He will. It's just that we think, the Lord will work it out, but let me tell Him how to do it and when to do it and how fast He should do it. And really, if you worked it out like this on a Wednesday before 10, that's how I want you to do it, Lord. And that's not the way. That's not the way of the Lord. Because He knows more than we do. He sees everything instead of our little pea brains. Anyway, I loved that. And then I loved how everyone pitched in to help take care of the graveyard. And just thinking about that, if you have anything to do with graveyards, or maybe you have a loved one that's buried wherever they're buried, and maybe it's a city or a state or something that takes care of it, like if it's one of those, but typically it's a church, that's what it is. And it takes a lot of work to take care of graveyards. It just does. You think about mowing, but you think about mowing around every stone, every little figurine, everything there's there. People put up flowers. You got to mow around them without messing them up. I mean, it is a huge undertaking. There's a lot of weed eating, so it's just such a real chore for people to take care of. Whether you have a giant cemetery or just a little small one, it's still a chore. So I really admire them trying to make sure that it was took care of. Now, the one at our church, I think it looks immaculate. It is beautiful, and it's one of our members that takes care of it. And the church pays him to take care of it, but he does such a good job. Everything is just perfect. But that's a real undertaking, and I admire them for worrying about it. And, of course, they would want it to look nice for Decoration Day. And if you're not familiar with that, it's held, it started with Memorial Day, soon turned into Decoration Day. It's what we call it here. And it's different for different churches, but typically in the summer, at some point from spring to summer to August or something, you'll have Decoration Day at your church. And like Opal was talking about, people coming in from other places, people will come home to their church and they will decorate their parents' graves, their grandparents, their friends, their cousins, whoever it is. And so, of course, you'd want your cemetery, your graveyard to look nice for all those people coming in and have it neat and nice. So then when they decorated the graves, it looked really nice. I wrote down a quote from Opal. This is the last thing I'll say about this part. I loved it, and it really does. I mean, we've just witnessed by reading this book, and it's not over yet, but all the things that Opal did, from the hospital bed to all the other things, you know. She said, but helping others is why God gives us blessings, so we should use what we have to better the world in some small way. And then she says, that's always how I felt about it anyway. So she's saying, you know, she really believes that helping others is why God gives us blessings, so we should use what we have to better the world in some small way. And often it is in those small ways. Opal's such a good example of that. Like even last week, the firewood, like I would have just give up and been like, we can't have church, there's no firewood. She said, no, we'll just all pitch in and everybody bring a stick of stove wood, and we'll just see if we can make it like that. And they didn't just make it like that, they had an abundance. So you remember in one of the readings I read the wonderful article that Barbara League sent me about Opal, and it was about the Christmas parade, and the man told the story about how Opal was giving out too much candy, and he said, Opal, you better slow down, because we're not even part way through the parade. And she said, the Lord will provide. And then before it was over with, somebody brought them 2 big bags of candy, and that had never happened before. So that's a good example of her faith, but also her being good to others. You can just imagine how happy she made those little kids that she was giving the candy to, giving it abundantly, not giving them one piece, but giving them abundantly. So I love all the ways that Opal has helped people. Even when she was at school, you think about when she was at the Highlands, how she went and stayed with the lady to help her. She was even helping people there. So she really lived that out. She really lived that quote out. So I hope you enjoyed today's reading, and I hope you'll leave a comment and tell me what you liked, what jumped out at you. And as always, I hope you'll drop back by next Friday so we can see what happens next.